Dom. Reeves stared at the letter in his hand, the law firm's letterhead gleaming under his kitchen lights. The words seemed to float off the page. Mrs. Amanda Reeves demands immediate spousal support of $20,000 per month, pending divorce proceedings. He placed the letter on the granite countertop of what had once been their dream home, a restored Victorian in San Francisco's Pacific Heights that they poured 5 years of weekends into renovating. Now it felt like a museum of a dead marriage. Dom ran his hand through his salt and pepper hair, surprisingly calm despite the letter's audacity. 6 months ago, he might have raged, might have immediately called Amanda screaming. But 6 months ago, he hadn't yet discovered the truth about the woman he'd spent 15 years loving. His phone buzzed. Amanda. Again. She'd been calling repeatedly since yesterday, probably wondering if he'd received her lawyer's demand. Dom had been deliberately avoiding her calls, letting her anxiety build. He'd learned patience in the last 6 months, a skill that had served him well as he methodically documented her betrayal. Dom had built his construction company from a single truck and a toolbox into one of Northern California's premier restoration firms. Amanda had been there in the early days, working as his bookkeeper while pursuing her interior design degree. They'd been a team then, scraping by, dreaming big. The success, when it came, had changed her in ways he hadn't recognized until too late. $20,000, Dom muttered, pouring himself 2 fingers of bourbon. Their prenuptial agreement had expired on their 10th anniversary. Amanda's idea, claiming it was unromantic. He'd agreed, believing they'd be together forever. The first hint of trouble had come 3 years ago when Amanda started spending more time with her new circle of friends. Wealthy women married to tech executives and venture capitalists. Dom's construction money was good, but not Silicon Valley good. Amanda had started coming home with tales of Aspen ski trips and Maldives getaways that her friends' husbands surprised them with. Then came the mystery shopping bags, the new jewelry, the unexplained absences. Dom had tried not to be suspicious, but the distance between them grew. When he suggested couples therapy last year, Amanda had laughed, calling it blue-collar solution to a communication problem. The final revelation had come during tax season. Dom had always trusted Amanda with their finances, until his accountant pointed out discrepancies in their joint accounts. Over $300,000 missing, transferred to accounts he knew nothing about. When confronted, Amanda had blamed household expenses and his financial ignorance. 2 weeks later, Dom had hired a private investigator. A month after that, he had photos of Amanda with Preston Chambers, a hedge fund manager whose Atherton estate Dom's company had renovated the previous year. The timestamps on the photos matched exactly with the largest withdrawals from their accounts. Dom picked up his phone and finally texted Amanda. Message received. Then he dialed a different number. Tessa Martinez, answered his lawyer. It's time, Dom said simply. She's asking for $20,000 a month. Tessa whistled. Bold, but not surprising. Do exactly as we discussed. I'll handle everything else. Dom hung up and looked around the house he'd rebuilt with his own hands. Then he walked upstairs to pack. 3 days later, Dom settled into his business class seat as the plane prepared for takeoff. His passport and an envelope containing a one-way ticket to Sydney lay on his lap. The flight attendant offered him champagne, which he declined in favor of water. He needed clarity for what was coming. What Amanda didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Dom had been planning this response for months. Australia wasn't a random choice. His company had recently secured a restoration contract for a historic opera house in Sydney, their first international project. More importantly, 6 months ago, on the advice of Tessa, he had established an Australian subsidiary and transferred significant assets there. All perfectly legal, all properly documented, all invisible to Amanda and her shark of a lawyer, Leo Friedman. Dom's phone vibrated again. Amanda, call number 27 since his text yesterday. He silenced it as the plane began to taxi. In the 18 hours since he'd texted, message received, Dom had executed the remaining steps of his plan with military precision. First, he'd withdrawn from their joint account exactly half of the balance. Not a penny more, despite the temptation. Then he'd gathered the essential documents Tessa had advised him to keep accessible: financial records, the PI's reports, and evidence of Amanda's infidelity. The most satisfying moment had been directing his crew to deliver all of Amanda's designer clothes and jewelry, purchased with their joint funds, to the charity auction his sister Nora ran annually for domestic violence survivors. He'd kept the receipts, of course. Evidence of her spending habits would be crucial. What he hadn't anticipated was Brendan Walsh, Amanda's brother, showing up at his office just as Dom was preparing to leave. "You think you could just run away?" Brendan had demanded, his Brooks Brothers suit as immaculate as always. Unlike his sister, Brendan had actually earned his wealth through a tech startup. Dom had always respected him for that. "I'm not running," Dom had replied calmly. "I'm working. Something your sister might want to try someday." Brendan had hesitated. "Look, I know Amanda can be difficult, but 20 grand? Leo went overboard with that demand. Amanda didn't even know he was asking for that much. Dom had simply stared at him until Brendan looked away. "Did she tell you about Preston Chambers?" Dom had finally asked. Brendan's face had fallen. "She said it was just one time. A mistake. 57 times in 8 months is a pattern, not a mistake. And did she mention the $300,000 she moved into accounts I didn't know existed?" Brendan had paled. "No. Tell your sister her lawyer will be hearing from mine. Everything else goes through them." Now, as the plane lifted off, Dom watched San Francisco recede beneath him. His phone showed 5 more missed calls from Amanda, plus one from a number he didn't recognize, probably Leo Friedman trying a different approach. What Dom had told Brendan was true. He wasn't running. He was strategically relocating. Tessa's instructions to her paralegal, what to do, as Dom had put it, included filing their countersuit at precisely the right moment, when Dom was already in international airspace. By the time Amanda and Leo Friedman realized what was happening, the first hearing would already be scheduled. Dom closed his eyes. For the first time in months, he felt a measure of peace. The game Amanda wanted to play had rules she didn't understand. He did. Halfway through the flight, Dom's phone dinged with an email from Tessa. "Package delivered. First response received. Proceeding as planned." Attached was a copy of the countersuit she'd filed, including evidence of Amanda's affair and financial impropriety, along with a request for an emergency hearing regarding the funds Amanda had diverted. By the time the plane touched down in Sydney 20 hours later, Dom had missed more than 70 calls from Amanda, plus calls from her parents, her brother, and even Vivian Patel, Amanda's best friend. Most surprising were 3 voicemails from Leo Friedman himself, each progressively more conciliatory than the last. Dom listened to the third as he collected his luggage. "Mr. Reeves, please call me back at your earliest convenience. There appears to have been a misunderstanding regarding Mrs. Reeves' support requirements. We should discuss this matter directly before proceeding further." Dom smiled as he deleted the message. Then he texted Tessa, "Landed safely. Friedman is backpedaling." Her response came immediately. "He should be. Judge Winters has the case. She hates entitled clients and shady financial maneuvers. See attached emergency hearing schedule." The attachment showed a court date 3 days away. Perfect. Dom hailed a taxi outside the airport. "The Langham, please," he told the driver. As Sydney's skyline came into view, Dom's phone rang again. "Amanda, call number 103. This time he answered. "Where the hell are you?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "Working," Dom replied calmly. "Something you might want to try. You can't just leave the country. Leo says it looks like you're hiding assets." Dom laughed. "That's rich coming from you. Check your email, Amanda." Tessa sent over some interesting bank statements. A beat of silence. "Dom, baby, we need to talk about this. 20,000 was Leo's idea, not mine. I told him it was too much. Did you tell him about Preston Chambers too? Or the money you've been siphoning off for the last year?" Another silence. "It's not what you think." "It never is," Dom said. "See you in court, Amanda." From a distance. He hung up as the taxi pulled into the circular driveway of the Langham. By the third day in Sydney, Dom had missed 110 calls from Amanda. Leo Friedman had called 15 times, each message more desperate than the last. The final one had been particularly satisfying. "Mr. Reeves, please have your attorney contact me immediately. Mrs. Reeves is willing to reassess her support requirements and discuss a more equitable arrangement." Dom forwarded the voicemail to Tessa, who replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a message. Hearing in progress now. Judge Winters looks pissed. Dom was standing on the balcony of his hotel suite, overlooking Sydney Harbor, when his phone rang with Tessa's call. "Well," he asked, skipping the greeting. "Complete victory," Tessa said, the smile evident in her voice. Judge Winters issued a temporary restraining order, freezing all accounts Amanda touched. She has to account for every penny of that missing money. And Friedman's demand? Thrown out. The judge called it offensive and untethered from reality. She particularly enjoyed the part where I mentioned Amanda hasn't worked in 5 years despite having a design degree, while you're actively expanding your business internationally. Dom exhaled slowly. "What about the house? You can go home whenever you want. Amanda has to vacate until the final hearing." Judge cited her financial misconduct as creating reasonable concern about preservation of marital assets. Dom leaned against the railing, watching boats crisscross the harbor. Did she show up? Oh yes, wearing what appeared to be about $15,000 of designer clothing and jewelry. Not her smartest move. And Friedman looked like he wanted to crawl under the table, especially when the judge asked if he'd advised his client about penalties for hiding assets during divorce proceedings. Dom nodded. "What's next?" "Settlement discussions. But we're negotiating from a position of strength now. My guess, she'll be lucky to get the clothes on her back and maybe a small settlement to restart her life." After ending the call, Dom stared at his phone, scrolling through the missed calls from Amanda. 110 desperate attempts to reach him. Part of him, a small, wounded part, felt a twinge of satisfaction at her panic. But mostly he felt hollow. 15 years of marriage. Countless dreams shared. A future planned together, now lying in ruins. His phone rang again. "Amanda." "Hello," he answered, his voice neutral. "Dom," she whispered, her voice raw from crying. "I'm being evicted from our home. The court's decision, not mine. Where am I supposed to go? Everything I have is here. You should have thought about that before Preston Chambers. Or before draining our accounts." A sob escaped her. "It wasn't like that. Preston was helping me invest the money. It was going to be a surprise for our anniversary, a villa in Tuscany. You always talked about retiring there." Dom closed his eyes. Even now, the lies continued. The bank statements show withdrawals going back 18 months. Our anniversary was 2 months ago, and you spent it at the Chambers estate in Napa. I have the credit card receipts and the photos. Silence stretched between them. "I did love you," she finally said. "In the beginning." "I know," Dom replied. "That's the saddest part." He ended the call and turned his attention back to Sydney Harbor. The Opera House gleamed white against the blue water, its renovation contract sitting on the desk behind him. New beginnings required hard endings. His phone buzzed with a text from Darius Miller, his best friend and the site manager he'd left in charge back home. "Heard the news. The crew and I are ready whenever you are. Business and beers as usual." Dom smiled and typed his response. "Be home in 3 days. First round's on me." Another text came through, this one from Nora. Amanda's clothes raised $47,000 for the shelter. Poetic justice. Dom laughed and put the phone away. He had preparations to make, a company to run, and a life to rebuild. For the first time in months, the path ahead looked clear. The final call, number 111 from Amanda, went unanswered. Message received indeed.